In this lesson, we're going to look at how to use mental ray materials. Alright, so whenever you want to use mental ray materials, we need to first change the renderer that we're using inside of 3ds Max. Now, we're not going to be talking about rendering just yet, but it's important to note that materials and rendering go together. Okay, they affect the way that the render is going to look. So to set this up, let's go ahead and move over in our toolbar and let's click on this render setup. Clicking on that's going to bring up our render setup dialog, and you'll notice that at the top it says render setup default scanline renderer. What we want that to say is NVIDIA Mental Ray or Mental Ray renderer. So in this case, we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom underneath the common tab, and we're going to click on assign renderer, and under production we're going to left click right here on these three dotted dots there for that button, and we're going to click on NVIDIA Mental Ray. Now yours might say something a little bit different. At least just say Mental Ray on that. Let's hit OK. And once that has been set, now what I can do is I can go to my material editor and I can now access these Mental Ray materials. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and start setting up the rest of our materials for our arcade cabinet. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to select the arcade cabinet. I'm going to right click on it and convert it to editable poly. I want to go ahead and get rid of that unwrap UVW modifier on it. Okay, and as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and select everything and do that same thing. So convert to editable poly. We're finished with modeling, and so that's no longer needed. And I just want to make sure that everything is collapsed. So on the arcade cabinet, I'm going to go ahead and go to polygon mode, and I'm going to select this polygon and hold shift, select the next polygon in line, and then hit grow. Actually, let's not hit grow just yet. Hit Control Z one time. So you should have that line of polygons selected. Let's do the same thing over here. Hold Control, hold Shift, and now hit grow, and that will select all of those. And I want to create a material that will only be applied to these polygons. So let's come in and let's go to one of these Mental Ray materials, and I want to use Autodesk Plastic Vinyl. Left click and drag that into your view, and you'll see that that comes in. Hold down your middle mouse button to pan around. And if I double click on that material, I can now change its color. So I'm going to click on the color swatch. I'm going to switch it to a reddish orange color, so very deep. Double click on the icon, you'll notice that it's very specular. Okay, very nice. I like the way that looks. And this is all derived from the options that we have here. So it's a plastic, it's a solid plastic, and it's also polished. Okay, very good. Now the rest of these I'm not going to worry about. I'm just going to leave those alone. Now before we go ahead and move on to the next part, we need to make sure that we assign that to our selection. In this case, it's going to assign it to the polygon selection. Turn off your polygon selection, and you'll notice that we have that orange around the edge. Now one thing that I do want you to notice is that we have kind of this rigid edge here. It's kind of a weird shading going on. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we have our smoothing group set up on that, so that way it looks smooth instead of faceted that way. So let's go back to polygon mode, and with those polygons selected still, let's scroll down and let's go down to polygon smoothing groups. You'll notice that there are 3 smoothing groups that are being used here, and what that's doing is giving us this faceted edge. I want all of these to be on the same smoothing group, so I'm going to hit clear all and then set that to smoothing group 1. Let's go ahead and turn off polygon mode, and you'll notice that that now looks smooth, no longer faceted. Okay, great. So now that that has been set, let's go ahead and start adding our materials to our buttons and things. So I'm going to actually take this material and I'm going to duplicate it. Now I can duplicate it by holding down Shift and dragging that down, and you'll notice that it creates a duplicate of that, and it's still staying hooked into those 2 maps, and that's totally fine. And then with this one selected, so double click on it, make sure that dotted line is around the edge. You can go ahead and change its color. So with this one, I'm going to leave it as that orange color, but I'm going to change the finish type on that. I'm actually going to set that to a matte finish. Notice how that changes the properties of your material. let's select the joysticks and let's assign that. There we go. So now we have those orange joysticks looking good. Happy with that. And let's go ahead and duplicate this one. So hold down Shift, drag that down. This one I'm actually going to double click on, and I'm going to change the color to black, but I want it to be kind of an off black. I don't want it to be pure black. Hit OK on that, and let's select the base of the joysticks, and we'll assign that. Okay, looks good. And then let's create the buttons for this. So I'm actually going to take this one and hold Shift, drag that down. Double click on it to make sure the dotted line is around the edge. And let's change this to a red color. Okay. Let's select the buttons that we want to be red. But remember, those are groups now. So how do we get to those objects? We can go to Group, Ungroup. Okay, so that way we're just working with the groups themselves. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that. With those selected and that material selected, let's assign. Let's come over to this one here. And let's set this to a different color. So I'm going to hold down Shift, drag this down. And let's change that color to that one to, let's say, let's do white. Hit OK and assign. Select these. And we'll hold Shift, drag that down to duplicate it. Double click on it. And then we're going to change this to a blue color. And that looks pretty good. Let's change that to where the red is off of that. So 0 on the red, 0 on the green, and 1 on the blue. Hit OK and then assign. Okay, there we go. So there we have those buttons. And now we need to apply that to the rest of these. So let's go to Group, Ungroup. Select those, double click on your red, assign. Select these. Select your white and assign. And then blue and assign. There we go. Okay, so now we have our buttons all set. We have our joystick all set. Now we need to deal with the screen on that. So let's go ahead and select the glass. Let's go to our material, and I'm going to bring in this Autodesk Solid Glass. Double click on that, and you have your color set to clear, and the glass is refraction is set to glass. Everything else looks good. I'm going to leave everything alone and then just assign that to that object. So now you'll see that it's transparent. Now we can see our screen. Let's go ahead and select that glass. Let's right click and hide selection. Now let's select the outer portion of that screen there. And let's change its color. Let's use that black plastic that we use for the joystick down here. So we'll go to our materials. We'll use this black matte plastic. Assign that. There we go. And then we have one final one, which is the screen. Let's create another material for it. The material that I want to use for this one, I'm going to use the Autodesk Generic. And this is kind of like the standard, but it's a Mental Ray material. We're going to bring that in. It's going to seem very familiar. And what I want to do is I want to change the generic image. We're going to left click and drag off of that. We're going to go to Standard. And on this standard, I want to use the gradient ramp. Now on this, if we double click on our gradient ramp, we can change the color that we want this texture image to show up as. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to left click on this middle one and delete that off of there. Whoops, let's not delete that. Let's go ahead and bring that all the way to the left. That will get rid of it. Alright, so let's double click on this one and let's change it to kind of a off darker green color. And let's take this one and let's make it the same color. Close to it, I should say, but make it a little bit lighter. So something kind of like that. Perfect. Now let's change the gradient type from linear to radial. Okay, so you can kind of see what we're getting here. Now notice that on that, let's make sure we set that back to radial. Notice that the dark color is on the inside. I want that to be on the outside. So let me actually change this or invert these colors. So let me bring that down, something like that, and then we'll take that up. Perfect. So there we go. Now we've got that color that we're looking for. We could do an interpolation on that. We could do an ease out on that, and it's kind of make that a little bit more of a gradient color. Great. So now that looks good. We could add a little bit of noise to that if we wanted to, but I'm okay with just the regular. And then now what we'll do is we'll take that material and we're going to assign that to the screen. Make sure you show material in viewport, and that should show up with our color. Looking really good. Okay, I like the way that's looking. And then we can also adjust things like its glossiness. So we can use the slider here. We can bring that glossiness up. Okay, so that way we get a little bit more out of that. You can also adjust the reflectivity on that as well. So we're going to use this oblique reflectance on that. And a little bit more direct. Now you're going to notice some things happening here in your scene. Whenever we start messing with these materials, sometimes it can slow the scene down just a little bit. That should be everything that we need for this. So now that we have that set, let's go ahead and close that down. And there we have our arcade cabinet. Let's go ahead and right click and unhide all. And let's put that glass back in there, as that's going to help with the reflectance of our environment. So what we're going to do in our next lesson is we're going to set this up to get ready for a render. So we need to set up our environment, and then we'll talk about how to render this out. So I'll get started with that next.